breaking news for your home. Wayday! Wayfair's big sale is almost here, and you can score the best deals in home. Like up to 80% off everything home. Yes, you heard that right. 80% off with free shipping on everything. Plus surprise flash deals all Wayday long. We're talking outdoor furniture and essentials, rugs, and more. All at Wayfair, and all up to 80% off during Wayday. Shop Wayfair's Wayday from April 25th through 27th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
China's influence operations in the United States. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Just a few days ago, the Federalist ran this headline: U.S.-UK lawmakers finally scrutinized China's use of, quote, cultural associations, end quote, as communist fronts. What's that all about? Well, it's about the Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department and its long-running intelligence gathering and influence operations abroad by embedding itself in seemingly benign overseas organizations, meaning in America. That is quoting right from this piece. A little bit more. These groups often operate in plain sight, shaping public opinion, supporting pro-Beijing policies, and sometimes interfering in election processes, all the while, the Federalist writes, enjoying the legal protections and tax benefits afforded to nonprofit organizations in open societies. And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news outreach arm of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. Great site, RLN. Great place to get your news. You may also get Bold and Blunt at Washington Times. Scroll to the bottom of WashingtonTimes.com and find the newsletter section. Click on it and find Best of Cheryl Chumley. Sign up. Just enter your email address. Sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get, along with my commentaries, my Bold and Blunts delivered right to your email box, both the audio and video versions. I do a video every Friday now, and audio as usual every Tuesday. And you won't have to go search for them. You'll get them delivered right to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. So, Scott Bessent, U.S. Department of Treasury, received this letter from the chair of the House Select Committee on the CCP just a few days ago, also this month in April. And in it, they detailed a little bit more about what's going on with the communists in China. They write, "We are writing to express our grave concerns about how the Chinese Communist Party is engaging in malign influence operations that interfere with our political process and democratic elections. The People's Republic of China is utilizing United Front organizations, proxies, and intermediaries within the United States, many granted tax-exempt status under Section 501c of the Internal Revenue Code, to engage in political activity that manipulates our democratic institutions and supports the interests of the CCP." I'll read just another sentence or two from this letter. "The Committee on Ways and Means has conducted extensive oversight into the exploitation of America's tax-exempt sector by foreign nationals, with particular focus on CCP-linked influence operations. Most recently, on February 10th, the committee held a hearing on foreign influence in America's tax-exempt sector." And from that, I imagine, came this federalist piece. So basically, what's taking place is the CCP, the communists in China, have found yet another way to influence America, to influence America's government and political system, and even more importantly, our younger generations, right? We've already saw Chinese influence on college campuses. We've seen Chinese interest buying up America's farmland and taking over Hollywood productions in some instances, right? Censoring Hollywood productions. We've seen China's influence in the economic sector, long time influence in the economic sector, and now we're seeing China's communists exploiting our 501c3 IRS code, our nonprofits, and infiltrating there to spread communist rot throughout America. So, can we ever get to the point where we can trust China, right? Do you remember years and years and years ago, it seems like a lifetime ago, where the prevailing thought in America's elite political circles, even those led by Republicans, went like this: if we just give China enough opportunity to develop economically, they will naturally turn more free market in their thinking. They will naturally become a freer society. And boy, that went over like a ton of bricks, right? That was epic fail. Epic fail. So will we ever get to the point where China is not just America's number one enemy? I don't think so, because China's basic goal is to dominate in the world. And their communist manifesto has nothing in common with America's Constitution. And so enemies are the order of the day between China and America. It's never going to come to a peaceful cohabitation, right? You can't have communism and America's free market coexist peacefully. And I have a guest today who has much more to say about China and some recent findings that he dug up and published after a very long investigative process and put them in a book about some other horrors that are going on in China. Very happy he had time to chat with me and go over his findings, as well as talk about what's going on in China and China's influence in Iran, right? Let's not forget that. So, without further ado, Jan Jekielek, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. So great to have you here.
Cheryl, I'm thrilled to be here with you.
So you are senior editor, Epoch Times, also host of American Thought Leaders. You have a new book out about China's organ harvesting called Killed to Order. And before we get into the very important topic matter of your book, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Iran and China's influences there. What's your take on how China is quietly behind the scenes helping Iran?
Well, it's a fascinating situation because Iran, of course, was kind of the linchpin in China's Middle East strategy for the longest time, and for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, partially it was the centerpiece of their whole Belt and Road Initiative, right? Partially it was, the place, for example, where they white labeled their surveillance and persecution technologies and so forth, through Huawei and so forth, while of course having their own back doors. It's sort of, when you work with a regime like China's, it doesn't come free. But perhaps most importantly, they used it, and I talk about this concept a lot in Kill to Order. It's not just about this organ harvesting industry. It's also about the mind of the Chinese Communist Party, if you will. And they instrumentalize absolutely everything, whether it be human bodies or so apparent allies, right? In this case, Iran was a great tool to keep America's gaze away from China, where America should have been looking. Looking at its greatest adversary, or being aware it was its greatest adversary, to having it focused on the Middle East, on Iran and these various non-state actors like Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis more recently that Iran has been funding and basically emboldening to keep the region in flames, and also, again, the U.S. embroiled in the Middle East instead of focusing on the Pacific.
You raise an interesting topic I would like to talk about further with you. You talk about the mind of the CCP, the mind of the communists in China, which I think America for far too long has lacked understanding of that. And I think back to, 20, 30 years ago when the mindset in America was that if we just did business with China, they would move automatically more capitalistic, more free. What is the real mindset of the Communist Party in China?
Well, this was possibly one of the biggest and most effective pieces of propaganda that they ever, I don't know if I could even say devised, because it was, I think, co-created with Americans, right? This is, you could call it the Kissinger doctrine, in fact, this idea, right, that we were going to liberalize them like we did Taiwan or South Korea, right, with financial support. That was never going to happen. And a big reason for that is that, well, either we misunderstood or we willfully misunderstood, if you will. Like, there's this Upton Sinclair quote, which I can't tell you off the top of my mind, but it's like, when you're financially incentivized to not notice something, you're likely to not notice it. That kind of idea. I think that played in here as well. No, I mean, basically what they did was, the communist China is a totalitarian state, okay, and has been from the beginning. And I've even been told that there's some very high-level China scholars in America that don't understand the distinction between totalitarian and authoritarian. And the distinction is there's multiple, but the central one is this: that the thing that we value so greatly in America, civil society. Okay, which is, I mean, I could describe it very briefly as people getting together and creating institutions in a grassroots format to deal with problems that appear in society, right? This is something that de Tocqueville admired the most about America and wrote about it, of course, in Democracy for America, and he sort of, prophesized highly, he was very prescient in this, that America would be great because of this, and indeed he was right. In China, under the Communist Party, they destroy this. They destroy all semblance of civil society because they correctly understand that it's civil society that fosters change. That's what happened in Taiwan. That's what happened in South Korea. And in Communist China, the thing that's the most important for the Communist Party of all is its survival and supremacy, and everything else takes a very distant second position. And that's the reason you always get atrocity in communist regimes, but it's also the reason why this whole liberalization idea was always a subterfuge from the beginning. And I think we really should have seen it, and I know why I saw it 25 years ago. And there weren't a ton. This was a 95.5 issue kind of thing back in the day, but there's some very specific tells.
So you talk about the inability of some in America to differentiate between totalitarianism and authoritarianism. And just listening to what you were saying about China, do you think the citizens of China, let me start with the citizens in Iran right now, right? We're being told that the citizens in Iran are different from the regime, that they want Donald Trump, they want America to come in and give them the ability to self-govern. Do you think the same can be said about the citizens in China? Or are they all so enamored with communism that even the citizens don't want freedom?
So they're definitely not that enamored. There's a combination of factors here, okay? On the one hand, the Chinese Communist Party has made a practice through its entire history of creating so-called black classes. Okay, and these are groups of people that it, for whatever reason, again, instrumentalizes. For the first group was landowners because they wanted to seize the land, right? So they propagandized the population against that group, making it okay to harm and steal from and kill these people, even in the extreme version. And there was always the side effect of the black class is that it's also a method of control, because you show everyone else what will happen to you if you get on the wrong side of the Communist Party. And of course, you can't really know if you'll ever get on the wrong side, but you go to great lengths to try to kind of stay subservient, if you will, or at least performatively so. So it has inculcated this sort of a culture over generations, right, in China. That is absolutely true. The flip side of that is that also the people that do have the freedom bug, there's some portion of the population in any society that is freedom oriented, if you will. And that, of course, that population is not happy as a core, and that's certainly tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Chinese. We don't know exactly, right? Certainly all religious dissidents, that's for sure, hundreds of millions. The first group I was just talking about people that are like, sort of politically freedom oriented. But, then you have religious dissidents. And so there's hundreds of millions of those. Then you have, there's a whole movement in China called Tuidang, which is quit the Communist Party. It's not actually just quit the Communist Party. It's quit the Communist Party and any of its affiliated institutions like the Youth League or the Young Pioneers, which is basically most people in China have been through this. But this movement over the last 20 odd years has racked up, I don't know, something like 600 million people that have privately, approximately, we don't know the exact numbers. It's not a sort of a scientific exercise in exact numbers, but a huge hundreds of millions of people have opted to say no to those institutions and the Communist Party. So these are all positive signs, right? Plus, right, the big, I guess deal, okay, that Deng Xiaoping made with the Chinese people, if you will, when after the Communist Party had, driven the whole society into a living hell of where people were literally, cannibalism was commonplace, right? This is after the Great Leap Forward. The deal was, we're going to let you be prosperous. We're going to let you build your little businesses and enjoy some personal prosperity, but don't touch the political side or we'll crush you. And that was the kind of the arrangement. But today we have a situation where, because of the way the sort of parasitic nature of this command and control economy that they've had for so long, it's really falling apart, and they really only have export left as their main driving force. And so all these people have lost all their money when they've invested in real estate, just all these different pieces, massive local debt. And so this deal that Deng Xiaoping struck with the people sort of thing is falling apart. So I think, in my view, China is by far the most open to this sort of thing where people would take destiny into their own hands instead of, being ruled by a despotic totalitarian regime. I can't tell you, what that exactly would look like right now, right? I do know that it's sort of a lot of external money is what's really fueling that, and just the nature of the economy itself being an export economy right now, right? It's basically they're entirely dependent on money from elsewhere to stay, solvent, to stay functional.
And the politics have shifted in the White House between the last administration and this administration. It's much more hard on China now than it was under Joe Biden. So I'm curious, because a few minutes ago you were talking about a quote that you were paraphrasing, that if you're financially incentivized, enough, then you'll be incentivized to not notice something. Do you think the political situation in America has shifted to the point, not just in the White House, but in Congress as well, with Democrats and Republicans, that it has shifted enough that they're not financially incentivized to dismiss China as they were?
That's a fascinating observation. I think you're making a very, very valuable point that I hadn't thought of before, but I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, I have a whole chapter in Killed to Order that's about how the Chinese Communist Party is expert at making people complicit, whether it's its own population or whether it's its so-called partners and allies and so forth. And part of it is those deep financial flows. It basically insinuated itself deep into the global financial and trade system, and making it, basically, if we're going to suffer, you're going to suffer too. They worked very hard to make themselves too big to fail. And then they started decoupling sort of things on their own terms while staying stuck in all these places where that kind of pain would be extracted if basically the West said, hey, wait a sec, you guys are up to no good, we're going to cut you off. Well, you're going to suffer too. So I think that's what actually this administration is working very hard to take apart, is those deep financial connections. I mean, the World Trade Organization, right? Basically, China only ever used it as a tool to attack, U.S. mainly, but Western countries, and trying to prevent it from doing whatever it wanted. What a disastrous decision, right? To help them in.
And I know we only have a few minutes left, so I want to jump to your book, Killed to Order. I haven't read it yet. I'm ordering it, though, and I can't wait to read it. It's a New York Times bestseller, I believe. What's it about? I know that the organ harvesting is the headline grabber there, but I know you go deeper than that.
Oh, no, absolutely. So first of all, it's about this forced organ harvesting industry that the CCP has been running for the last 26 odd years, which is in itself just difficult to conceive. It's such a kind of situation of horror, if you will, that it's hard for people to imagine. It's so much beyond even the very horrible run-of-the-mill organ trafficking scenarios we have in different countries around the world. It's a systemic, it uses this black class creation propagandizing method to dehumanize the people that it's going to use. I don't know how much, if we have enough time left for me to just describe in a nutshell how that system works. But, you in this Kill to Order organ harvesting scenario, you have to have a state actor, and you have to have that power to dehumanize entire groups of peoples, right? That's why you need someone who can push this massive coercive power through the population. And you also have to have the ability to incarcerate huge numbers of people. Okay, like one of the whistleblowers that we had early on in 2005, 2006 was a transplant surgeon whose patient went to China and got a new heart in 2 weeks. The guy was desperate. He says, I'm going, and he gets it in 2 weeks. Okay, scheduled. And so this was a massive red flag, because on the one hand, right, in an ethical transplant situation, someone really has to have a catastrophic accident in order to be able to give you that heart, right, that you're looking for. And also that person has to kind of match you in different ways. So usually it's blood type, tissue type, and size, because our bodies reject things that are very foreign. I mean, even an organ that's matched that well can be rejected, but that just reduces the likelihood. So here, okay, so you in this ethical transplant situation, there's an accident, but in the Chinese situation, you're scheduling the accident. So you already know that someone's being killed, right, at a certain time, which is the date that transplant's happening. And number two, the question is, how do I get this 2-week wait time? How do I find this very rare person that happened to have an accident and also matches me in all these different ways, right? It's very rare. That's why people wait months or years in an ethical situation. Well, here I can get it in 2 weeks. Well, how does that happen? Well, so to go back, how they built this whole thing, in 1999, there was a very popular meditation discipline called Falun Gong, right. Truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. This is what these people were practicing, okay? 70 to 100 million of them by the end of the 90s. It was very kind of grassroots, very bottom up, no hierarchy, no worship, these kinds of things, but also very spiritual. And the regime decided to crush it, to eradicate it, to use the language of the dictator at the time. Okay, that didn't mean kill everybody. That mean push people into this black class scenario, re-educate them, break them, get them to confess their sins against the Communist Party. This whole, okay, they call it re-education or transformation. But these people proved incredibly resilient to this. Okay, and the effect of that was they incarcerated maybe 1 million, maybe 2. We don't know. It was like 2005. The special rapporteur on torture at the UN, who I met that year at the UN, he estimated that half of all the people in the Chinese prison system, massive incarceration system, not just prisons but camps, everything, were Falun Gong.
Oh, wow.
So then they started blood typing, tissue typing, and organ scanning them. Okay. And now they had a database. And now that person, right, let's say take another person who's paying, which was a common way to do it, 100 or 200 grand for a new heart. Okay, the moment that transaction is made, okay, there doesn't have to be a catastrophic accident because the person that's matched to you is already in a database pre-matched, right, incarcerated, a prisoner of conscience that can then be shipped and killed to order, which is the reason my book is called Killed to Order. That's what's happening over there to this day. But they built it on the backs of this first black class that they used in this sort of what's called, what one of the recent PhD thesis authors that wrote on this issue calls extractive repression. You can crush a group of people at the same time you're monetizing it substantially for your own benefit.
I think what you describe is so unimaginable to Americans in Western society who are used to being born into freedom. The idea of something that you just described, it sounds like a science fiction movie. Is how much of this is, just really well vetted fact versus people, second or third or fourth party information?
It's an excellent question. It's very hard to get good data on atrocities. And Well, how about I give you a few pieces of evidence that are pretty stark? Mm-hmm. But back in 2020, between 2018 and 2020, there was an international tribunal that was held to assess the entire body of evidence. And the body of evidence is all sorts of things. For some of it is these short wait times. Some of it is these ads for transplants that existed prior to 2006. Some of it is phone calls that are made to hospitals where people say, yes, we can get you that organ in 2 weeks. Some of it is, there's a whole large body of it, okay? None of it is someone walking into a room and seeing someone being forced organ harvested. Probably it should be obvious why that is right. You're never gonna get that kind of evidence because it's a police state, because the crime scene is a operating room. Everything's cleaned up, right? It's so yes, it's extremely hard to get this evidence, but here's a couple of pieces of evidence which are super interesting. One of them is there's actually a survivor of it. His name is Chen Pei-ming. And a couple of years ago, he actually pushed the issue forward quite a bit when he went public. When there were body scans on him, he was shown to be missing part of his liver and part of his lung, and this was taken against his will. Wow. Some years back. So he's kind of a living smoking gun. Well, of course, it's just one person. That's true. It's not a whole ton of people. But I didn't even think we would ever see one because it's so easy to quote unquote dispose of the evidence in this crime, right?
Yeah.
So the second thing is there was a paper written a few years ago in the American Journal of Transplantation titled "Execution by Organ Procurement." Okay. And what they did was the authors asked this question, like, could it be that in the published Chinese transplant literature, right? Because we know that there really is only a kill to order industry in China. There's no evidence of any credible, organ donation system or anything like that. And also when you build bureaucracies like this bureaucracy of death, if you will, it's very hard to dismantle them. And it's hard to imagine how a system, sort of an ethical system would emerge when something like this is churning away. And, basically organs available on demand, especially to the super elites, right? And China. Well, this paper, they asked the question, is the dead donor rule being violated openly by any chance in the published methods of Chinese transplant literature, scientific literature? And the answer was yes. They looked at 2,000 to 3,000 papers, and they found 70 examples where the authors had actually written into their methods that they had killed the person by removing their organs. Wow. I think they didn't fully understand they had written that in. And I also think that they're so desensitized to this, it's just kind of the way it works over there, that they don't fully realize that it's a problem, if that makes sense. Right. And to the point where they wrote it into their scientific methods 71 times in 71 separate papers. These are, in your answer, it's a good question, because it's extremely difficult to get this sort of, court of law. You caught the person was holding the gun, they fired it, they had bad intent, and the jury gets to decide. That type of evidence, very, very difficult in this sort of situation.
Absolutely. Right? But yeah. Your point about them using that as scientific method, like there was nothing to see here, no big deal. I mean, that's telling in itself. And listening right. to you explain reminds me of, there was a book written by a North Korean defector a few years ago who was trying to get the world to understand the re-education camps and the chilling, nightmarish experiences that he suffered. And as you say, it's very difficult in these closed societies to get firsthand evidence. I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on Bold and Blunt, Jan. This is going to be a great read, and congratulations on this book. I mean, it must have been an investigative triumph for you. So thank you very much.
Well, it's incredible. The big thing is, it seems like the collective consciousness somehow has changed, with the social consciousness, and people are finally, I think, ready to accept that it might be real. So I'm excited. I think it's this almost a little miracle that it's on the New York Times bestseller list, and there's so much interest in it. If you want to get it, killtoorder.com is where you can get it. That's the direct Amazon link, but you can also get it at your local bookstore, or try to get it from a library or something like that. I mean, thank you so much for having me on, Cheryl.
Of course, Jan, and I'll see you soon, I'm sure. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.